Hi, I'm LifeCoachLANDRY, and the topic is 8 ways to talk to someone and avoid them or you being defensive. The way you talk to someone often determines the response you get from them. So you have to remember when you're talking to someone, you have to kind of come at it from an angle of you want to resolve something. Many people get in conversations and all they are is defensive or come from a place of hurt or being passive aggressive. And that's not what you want to do in a relationship, right? I always say in a lot of my videos, 1 to 3 conversations max, whether that be over the course of a week or a couple of days, whatever it takes, or sometimes that can last a month. The point is that the conversation should count and they should be productive and constructive. A lot of times people get in conversations and all they're really wanting to do is yell at you or be defensive or be angry at you. Or you may feel that way. You may be coming from a place of hurt. Or when you're talking to them, they unleash a couple of words that trigger you to become very hurt, which makes things very emotionally intense. So what you want to do is you want to avoid that, right? So I'm going to give you 8 ways to kind of do that. Number 1 is let's all, avoid blame. If you start coming at someone right away, letting them know they're the source of all the problems. Now, let's say they are a big source of the problems, but relationships, there are 2 people involved. So you're causing cause and effect on a constant basis with each other. You're hoping that you're in a good relationship and that's not happening, but sometimes it does, right? So you want to, avoid wording that sounds like you're blaming them. And words always matter in intense conversations because when people are listening to you, they're looking, people who are naturally defensive are looking for words to jump on to feel like you've hurt them, right? Now, no one wants to be with a defensive person. Defensive people, are high strung. They're constantly hurt. They can't get out of their own head about their emotions. But sometimes it's about a situation and they're not like that entirely. And that's what you want to work on, right? You want to work with the people who are there situationally, but in general have a good time, enjoy who you are, want to be with you. If they're naturally always defensive or they're always finding a reason for you two to fight, or let's say they don't fight with you, but as soon as you bring up a subject, their way of going about that, navigating that with you is to bring up something you've done. Therefore, you really can never solve anything with people like that. What you want is you want to be with someone who, when you bring something up, they understand and they tackle that with you. And then if they have something of a concern, they bring that up next. But you don't play tennis with emotions, right? You don't go back and forth. So number 2, going along with that is, you want to be honest. You want to speak your truth. And you hope that the other person is going to give you their truth as well. However, you want to do it in a manner which shows that you still want to be together. Look, if you're at a table and you're having conversation with someone, it's to resolve the problem. If you're at the table to what I call cock out of your mouth for long periods of time, and long periods of time, in my opinion, is anybody who talks longer than 5 to 10 minutes making their point really just wants to vent. All right, because when people really care about resolve, they say things, they ask questions, they get feedback, and they either show happiness or concern. But either way, there is a constant back and forth dialogue going on between 2 people. All right. So during that dialogue, that brings you to number 3. You want to admit your own mistakes. It's very important that you talk about your end of the spectrum. Let's say that 80% of what's going on is them, but 20% you. Well, you don't, even though it is lopsided and people do make mistakes sometimes, and you do want to hold them accountable, what you want to do is you want to hold them accountable. You want to tackle that, but you also want to let them bring up their own concerns. But once you get past that, it's okay to kind of go into the admitting your own mistakes in general. But, when people love each other and they want to be together, they're not sitting there ready to fire off their hurt and their pain. They're ready to admit their own mistakes and resolve it so that the relationship can move forward. Number 4, speak about your own feelings, viewpoints, and actions, not the other person's. This is really important. A lot of people will say, well, I'm worried about this for you, or I'm concerned that you, or they'll say you did this and that, that makes me feel yada, yada, yada. Let's be honest here. And I've said this in my other videos. Nobody makes you feel anything. People are who they are, and you decide how you feel about it yourself. And once you feel that, you decide where you want to take that. I call it a negative positive value. So when people talk to me, I decide whether that is a negative value or that is a positive value to the conversation. Remember, if you're here to resolve things with somebody, keep this in mind. Is what you're about to say or do going to help you get closer or further from your goal with this person? If it's going to help you get closer, well, then obviously you want to say it. If it's going to help you get farther, but it's the truth, then maybe find a more positive way to package it so that you're still speaking your truth, but it's said in a way that they can connect with. Obviously, if you're dating someone, you should know them well enough to know these kind of things, right? Number 5, be open to hearing the other person's point of view. I have a video on how to become a better listener. And it's very important that when you have a conversation with someone, like I said earlier, that you allow them to interject their viewpoint into what you're saying. Nobody just rules the roost with their viewpoint. Unless you've done something detrimentally wrong to where the person can basically tell you, hey, you've done this. This really hurt my feelings. And it's very blatantly obvious that you did something that's all you. That's typically not going to be the case. There's always another point of view, usually, right or wrong. But, you should acknowledge the other person's feelings and interject them into your own thought process. When you don't do that, you're not really having a two-way conversation. You're not really trying to resolve things. All you're trying to do is speak your hurt. Well, that's what friends are for, confidants are for. When you get to the table with your partner, you should be there for resolve, meaning, my general rule is try not to talk more than about 5 minutes. Every once in a while, you need to give a good speech if you're trying to shape something up. But in general, if you're talking longer than 5 minutes, even if you're storytelling, you're not really having a conversation. You're wanting someone to listen to you, and that's not the same thing, okay? Number 6, concentrate on expressing your feelings rather than focusing on the actual problem, okay? Say, I feel or I felt often is avoiding confrontational things. And that's okay. That's what you want, right? You want to say, I felt or I feel. And the reason you want to say that is it'll keep them from kind of scratching their nose and their head going, wait, what am I listening to? You're trying to get them to a place of understanding, right? What is the point of any conversation between two human beings, right? To share information and have mutual understanding, whether that be laughter, same humor, whether that be solving a problem, or may that be just talking about, the color of the grass outside. Number 7, if either person you're addressing starts to feel the least bit angry, stop the conversation and take a break. Right? A lot of people will push and push and push. You need to recognize for yourself, if you are the type to be prone to be angry based on a sentence or a word, you need to back off. What you want to do during this process, though, you want to assure your partner that when you do this, you're doing it to cool down and that you want to revisit the conversation, not that you're abandoning the conversation and the progress that you've made thus far or the progress that you want to make, right? Number 8, and this is a very interesting one. I think a lot of people should take into account. Throughout the conversation, be willing to listen, forgive yourself as well as the other person, and move on from the issue, right? If you're on your 3rd conversation and you're getting nowhere fast between two people, you really want to check what you're actually trying to accomplish here. Because sometimes people will sit down in one of these conversations and it literally will just be venting. It's very important that when you're dealing with someone who just wants to vent, that you shut the conversation down and ask them to return to it, because it's obviously just going to create resentment in you if all they're doing is talking, and anytime you bring up an idea, they're quick to shut you down. That's just because they want to talk. So you want to identify that, because that is probably the biggest thing that keeps people from accomplishing tackling their problem. Other than that you flat out disagree, or you leave each other scratching your face going, I am lost at what we're trying to do here. It's very important that we all realize that if we're in love and we want to be with someone, our only objective is to resolve something. Anything below that is considered a failure in a conversation between two people. So if you're making progress towards that, well, then it's not a failure. But if you talk for a long time, you get nowhere, and in the end, you land at the same disagreement, or come to the next conversation and land at the same disagreement, then that conversation is failing. It can be failing because either you directly do not have the same perspective about it, or you just may have two ways of communicating that aren't compatible, but can be altered with some of these 8 things. So take the time to address this. And, I always say, where there's a will, there's a way in a relationship. And if you really care about each other, like I said, think about, is what you're doing getting you closer or further from your goal with this person? If it's getting you further, check yourself at the door and say, hey, am I losing myself in this relationship, or am I losing the person I want to be with because of my fears and insecurities? Typically, fears, insecurities are reasons why people play tennis with emotions rather than resolve things. Okay. So find out if these things apply to you. Email me if you want to talk about these things, and I will talk to you soon.